Welcome to Impact You Wellness Wednesday Live. Today, I am so excited to have our guest, Ricklyn Woods, in the house with us today. I'm your host, Robyn Engelson, the serial entrepreneur and autoimmune expert. Ricklyn Woods is a resume writer. She is a career coach, a podcast host, a speaker, and four-time certified HR professional with over 17 years of experience in human resources. She helps her clients discover their strengths and attract opportunities that align with their values, strengths, and natural talents by helping them see their significance and articulate their awesomeness to potential employers on their resumes and interviews. With an extensive background in human resources, Ricklyn pulls back the curtain on the recruiting process from the perspective of the employer, which gives her clients a significant advantage over the competition. She frequently shares career advice and resume writing tips on LinkedIn and has also shared helpful insights on Blavity.com, CareerToolBelt.com, and other media outlets. Ricklyn has a bachelor's degree in psychology and master's degree in industrial and organizational psychology and a concentration in coaching and consulting. She also completed a certificate in personal development coaching from the CAP Institute. Welcome, Ricklyn. We are so excited to have you on today. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a little weird hearing someone read your bio and talk about you. You're like, I did do all those things.
Absolutely. Yes, it's so true. You're a very accomplished professional. And when someone does read it back to you, it's really puts it in perspective as, you know, what you've done and how you can help people with your expertise.
Yes. So thank you again so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
You're welcome. Let's dive in. So share a little bit about your background and just really how you got to where you are.
Yeah, you know what? That's such a great question. First and foremost, I'm a mom. Like before any of all of that, I was a mom, and I was actually a teen mom. I had my oldest son when I was 17 years old in my senior year of high school. And, he became kind of the catalyst for all the things that I've accomplished throughout my career. That he was the motivation for that, because I wanted to be able to provide a certain quality of life for him. Early in my career, I struggled, like a lot of folks, to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, so to speak. And,
Right.
had different types of jobs early career. But I had a epiphany one year and said, you know what, I want to be the person that's helping people get jobs. And that's when I pursued and landed my first job in human resources as a recruiter. And so I was able to do just that. I was able to help folks to get hired, as well as helping organizations fill positions. And then from there, I just decided, I like HR, pursued my education certifications, and moved up the ladder, so to speak, and held different HR positions. And then in 2020, when the pandemic hit, when a lot of folks were going through different career transitions or just life changes and looking at their own lives and careers differently, I pivoted into a career coach and took all those years of HR experience and the good, bad, and everything in between, and launched a career coaching practice, resume writing business, and that is what I've been doing ever since.
That's fantastic. I love that story, starting with your son and really just being able to use that as a pivotal force in your life and make that your why. And then as it transitions throughout your career, the why can change, but who you're doing it for never changes, right?
Right.
So, it's like your son is so powerful as a boy mom as well. My son's a teenager now, going into high school. Yeah, and everything I do for him. The reason why I do what I do, and the pandemic really did change a lot of how we work, how we interact with people, our wellness, and in the job force. So if you could just share just a little bit about your experience in bridging the two together, what happened with the pandemic and what's happening now, the aftermath is what I like to call it, as far as wellness and HR in the workforce.
Sure. Well, we spend more hours in the day working than we do anything else on our jobs with our peers and colleagues. And over the last years, we've seen a lot of discussion around work-life balance, work-life integration, whatever it is you want to call it. But I think what 2020 taught us, especially with schools being closed, families being at home, is that, there really isn't a clear distinction between work and home life. Like they're
Mm,
very much
yes.
related and integrated. Like most people work to take care of their families. Like I don't know
Mhm.
anybody who just works because they just love working, right?
Right.
So they're so it's to take care of themselves and their families. And so throughout the generations, I know for my mom, and her birthday's today, as a matter of fact,
Oh,
we're
happy
recording
birthday.
this episode. But she grew up in a time when, you worked because you had to have a job.
Mhm,
You didn't have to like what you did, but you had to have a job. But I
mhm.
noticed with my generation, even my kids' generation, that thought process is changing. People want to do work that they enjoy doing and work that brings them joy. And I
Yes.
think in 2020, a lot of people gave themselves permission to say, you know what? I don't like the way this work is making me feel. Like this is
Yes.
totally killing me
Mhm.
mentally,
Yeah.
emotionally. And I want to do work that brings me more, a greater sense of well being. And there's a huge correlation between the work we do, how we feel, and even our physical well being. I mean, there are folks who are experiencing stress and, mental stress, physical stress, and it's directly related to their job. And oftentimes,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
making that decision to do
Mhm,
something different to preserve
mhm.
their health.
Absolutely, 100% spot on. I know with autoimmunity, I have Hashimoto's thyroid autoimmune disease and
Mm,
hypothyroidism, and I work with a lot of moms that have the same or another, and or I should say, because when you have one autoimmune, you always have more
mhm,
autoimmune diseases, and it's debilitating. It's a debilitating
mhm.
disease. It's not life, threatening, but it's life changing. And
Yeah.
having to have that balance between working and being at home and taking care of the family and the kids, it truly is a balance. And the health and
Mhm,
how I love what you said about how you feel and you want to have more joy
mhm,
in your life. That's what the pandemic really taught us. And a lot
mhm.
more people work from home so they can have that be with their kids. But then what you mentioned, it's kind of you can physically work 24/7. And
Yeah.
so where's the balance in that? And then the aftermath
Mhm.
of, people are still working from home, but some people are back in the office. And how do you transition? So if you could talk just a little bit about what your thoughts are on that and the transition and the well-being, especially having an autoimmune disease. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. You know, one thing I love about where we are today is that employees and people have more choice
Mm,
in terms of where they work, what kind of work they do. So when I work with my clients, one of the first things we do is we go through kind of a clarity process and
mm,
really understanding what is it that you want in your next opportunity. Like, take off any boundaries, like just
mm,
lay it out there. If you want to work from home, let's put that on the list. If you want
mm,
a manager who's understanding, put that on the list.
mm,
What are some of the benefits that are important to you in your next organization? So getting clarity about what it
mm,
is you want and need for your life
mhm.
and going after that. Sometimes people
Yes.
are afraid to limit their opportunities by being so
Mm,
specific. But
mhm.
then I have to remind them, well, if you land that job and it doesn't meet your needs for your family, for yourself, then we're going to be back here again,
Absolutely.
sooner than you think,
Right.
looking for another opportunity. So I think
Absolutely.
we're in a space to do that. And I always tell my clients, like, name it. What is it that
Mm,
you want? Write it down, be clear about that and
mhm,
what you need. And then that's what we're targeting as we're going through this career
mhm,
transition that you're on. So I think knowing what you need and
mhm.
really, not settling for less than that because you only get one life to live,
Absolutely.
go
Absolutely.
for it.
I totally agree with you on that, Ricklyn. And clarity is such an important word in what we do in life.
Yeah.
What you just mentioned in the workplace, being clear on what you want. Because why would you want to jump ship with something that's not what you want when you are kind of comfortable where you are, right?
Yes.
And so the same thing is reminds me, is familiar with autoimmunity because most people with, especially Hashimoto's, we have brain fog. The clarity just is not there, complete brain fog, and it's just unexcusable, but there's no denying it. You could be in the
Mhm.
middle of a meeting and literally forget someone's name. And it's not that you're forgetting it, it's that, or you could be in a train of thought and literally have no idea what the next words are. And it's
Mhm.
not that you're not smart. It's not that you're not capable. It's the disease talking. And so the clarity is so important on so many levels. And that's what I do with my clients, is to gain clarity, right? And the wellness behind that. So what does that mean? How are we going to get clear on who you are, what you want with your health and your job as a working mom, right?
Yes.
So in order to do that, what you pointed out, the different things of what you want to be crystal clear is so important in all levels of life. It's not
Oh,
just,
yeah.
it's not just in the workforce. It's not just at home. It's all your whole life. And you do have only one life to live. So why not make it the best? Why not start living instead of existing and have that clarity in what you do? Yeah, absolutely. So with that, are there certain tips that you recommend for working moms to gain clarity in the workplace? I know you mentioned what you do with your clients, which is incredible. But while someone is, in the job, and maybe they don't want to leave the job, maybe they're happy, but how can they gain more clarity around what they're currently doing?
I'm a huge fan of doing strengths assessments. So one that I really like and use with my clients is the Strength Finder assessment. Have you heard of that one?
I have, yes.
Okay. So there's that. There's the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs assessment. And there are tons out there. But I find a lot of times we do work and we do certain jobs and tasks because we can, but not necessarily because we're really good at it or we even really enjoy it. There are certain skills that are more like burnout skills. Like I can do it, but the more of it that I do, the more burned out I'm going to feel, as opposed to being energized. So,
For
I
sure.
am, just to give an example, I'm a thinker and I need downtime to be able to think and process. So if I'm in a role where I'm in meeting after meeting after meeting without time to regroup and process all the information
Right.
I've taken in, then
Yep.
it'll start to weigh down on me and I'll start to feel
Absolutely.
stressed. I'll start to feel overwhelmed. And so I know that about myself and I validated that with some assessments to really learn what my strengths are and how I work best. So I certainly recommend that. And even if, like you said, you're not looking to leave your current employer, understanding that about yourself and sharing that with your leader
Yep.
could be really beneficial. So whenever I've started a new job, I'm like, look, this is how I work best. Like I have those conversations with my leader and say, these are my triggers. This is how I work best. This is what I can use from you that'll be helpful for me to be successful.
I
So
love
knowing that and then communicating that so that your leader is aware of how to support you.
Fantastic. I love what you just said. Like, effective communication is so important. And I always share with my clients and my business partners, I'm part of clear communication. I strive on clear communication. So there's no one gets upset. No, you understand each other. You can have a disagreement, but the clear communication is so important and makes you more effective, a more effective person, a more productive person. And so going into a job or communicating, maybe you've been at the job for a while and things have changed or your supervisor's changed or just the tasks itself, your jobs evolve, right, over time,
Yes.
even though you have the same position. So, so in just going to clarify that for yourself, going back to the clarity part, and then having the effective communication with your supervisor and also, I believe, the team as well. And so in your coworkers and colleagues, so everyone's on the same page. And the downtime, yes, thank you for saying that, Ricklyn, because
Yes.
it's so important. So many people just go, 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 go. It's like, and then you burn out and you're wondering why you can't, wake up the next day. You feel like a train ran you over, right? It's like
Yes.
that downtime is so important. And I'm very similar that way. I need to process. I can't just come back to you with all this information. Like I got to process this,
Yes.
and then figure out the best way to come back to you. So it's not that I'm ignoring you. It's that
Yes.
I'm being effective in my communication because I'm clear on what I'm doing. And so I love how we wrap that together, because what you said about the clarity and then the communication and at the downtime, they're all pieces of the puzzle that you get together, right?
And that's also how you protect your peace, you maintain your well-being. A lot of times, when working a job, we feel, somewhat helpless, like we have to do as we're told, we have to, be a good employee. But sometimes you've got to, like you said, communicate and advocate for
Yes.
yourself and for what you need. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like
No,
your manager will probably appreciate you for
absolutely.
helping them to
Yes.
help you.
Absolutely. And I feel it also helps the greater good of the organization, right?
Hmm.
Because then you're working better together and you're more productive and you're going to be able to
Yes.
get the job done better and more effectively and perhaps do other things that maybe weren't in the realm of your scope of work as well. Um,
Hmm.
so let's transition a little bit as far as, discovering your strengths.
Yeah.
So I know most people, oh, I know what I'm good at. I'm good at this, this, and this. And, but it really comes down to it. What is your recommendation or how do you work with your clients to find their strengths so they can truly be successful in their jobs?
Well, it's definitely an exploration process because, as you said, most people, especially if you've been working any length of time, have some ideas about what they're good
Mhm.
at.
Yeah.
But what I find is that even though you may have ideas of what you're good at, you
Mm,
might not know how to necessarily articulate it in a way that
mhm.
makes sense for the
Yes.
larger group of the people that you're working with. So,
Mhm.
with that Strengths Finder assessment, most every person that I've had take that, they do have some ahas, like, or
Really.
even just confirmations, like, I am that way. And I just thought that was, just part of who I am, but I didn't realize that was actually
Mm,
a strength that I should be
right.
leveraging and
Yes.
talking about more.
Mhm.
And it provides a language around it. So
Mhm.
sometimes we may feel a certain thing, I feel like
Mhm.
I'm good at that. But with some of the assessments, it'll actually give you some language with how to describe what that strength is and
Yes.
how to communicate it to other people and some examples of how it shows up
Mhm.
in your
Sure.
working life and as well as your personal life.
Absolutely. I truly believe languaging is everything in all areas of life because
Hmm.
it's the effective communication that we get to show other people. If we can't effectively communicate with our languaging, our strengths, or
Yeah.
our weaknesses for that matter, too, in the
Hmm.
workplace,
Hmm.
as well as with our partner, with our kids, then it's going to be a downhill battle and it's going to be tough. But if we're able to recognize those strengths and effectively have that languaging behind it, and know how to say it
Hmm.
and know, the buzzwords, if you will, in whatever industry you're in, it
Yes.
really does make a difference. It really does
Hmm.
make a difference.
It does. And you mentioned weaknesses. When you're looking at your strengths and assessing for your strengths, that's often when your weaknesses become even more
Mm,
clear.
yes.
Because you'll
Yep.
learn, well, and then it might even make sense. Like, why are you feeling so anxious
Mhm.
when having to do this particular task?
Yep, makes sense.
Because that's really not your sweet spot, and it's an
Mhm,
area that's much more difficult for you
mhm.
to do than others. So sometimes just better understanding and like getting the permission
Yes.
to, like, what, this is not what I'm really good at. And what I love about strengths finders, and this is not to promote them or anything, but I think it's important to note, they don't
Mhm.
necessarily suggest focusing on improving your weaknesses. They
Mm.
focus on leveraging your
Mhm.
strengths, because
Interesting.
sometimes we there could be a lot of emphasis on focusing on what we don't do well, and
Mhm.
improving it and getting better at it, but
Yeah,
that's not really what our sweet spot
right.
is.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important to find that sweet spot because it may not be what you think it is because you could be doing something that everyone told you you should be doing since you were a child.
Very
But
true.
but is that really what you wanna do? Is that really what your strengths are? Are you leveraging I love what you said, the leveraging. Are you leveraging your strengths and leveraging the weaknesses
Hmm.
for the strengths? And
Right.
especially with autoimmunity, it's so important to truly understand your strengths and weaknesses because you already have something batting against you, right? It's such an
Yeah.
opportunity to know what you're good at and what you're not good at, so you know that your autoimmunity is not gonna hold you back. It's not gonna
Hmm.
take away from your greatness, and, like,
Yes.
when the fatigue is so prominent with Hashimoto's and the brain fog and, just feeling blah is the way I like to describe it. You just feel blah all the time if you don't take care of it.
Mm.
And in order to be a productive employee and an effective communicator, at work and at home in all areas of life, it's really a challenge and it's an
Yeah.
opportunity to be able to figure it out So you are knowing what your strengths are to deliver a great
Mm-hmm.
experience. I mean, that is spot on, spot on.
Yeah.
And so, how would you describe or talk about owning your career? Like, what does that mean to you? And then we'll get into a fun discussion about that, because I really feel that owning your career is it's so important, and it really determines and makes you who you are. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm. I love that question. So for me, owning your career is, really being clear about what you want and going for it,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what. So I'll give you an example. I was having a
Okay.
conversation with a client just yesterday, and he's
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of a career transition, and he said that he was nervous about this career transition. I said, well, if you could be a little bit more specific, what are you nervous about? And he
Mm-hmm.
says, well, I'm nervous that I might have to move to another state. I'm nervous that I might have to, take less money than I want. I'm nervous that I might have a supervisor that I don't like to work with. And I
Mm-hmm.
said to him, okay, all of those things are valid concerns, but you don't have to move to another state if you don't want to. You
Right.
don't have to accept a job that's not paying you what you need to make.
Mm-hmm.
When you're interviewing, you can interview that supervisor just like they're going to interview
Mm-hmm.
you. So
Right.
a lot of times people feel like they just have to accept whatever's
Mhm. Yeah.
presented to them.
Mhm,
Like they
mhm,
don't have any ownership of the outcome. And
mhm,
I really believe that we do. I work with a lot of people who are transitioning to new careers,
mhm,
whether a career in HR or other industries, and there's always this doubt. Can it
mhm.
can it happen? Sure, it can.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean it's not going to be work. There are
Mhm.
some things you have to do strategically to make it happen. But
Right.
when you own your career, you have the
Mhm,
belief and the
mhm,
faith that whatever it is your heart's
mhm.
desires, you can manifest that with the right
Absolutely.
strategy and putting in the right work.
I agree with you. It's really comes down to the mindset. Like do you believe it or do you not? Because if you want it to happen, it will. And if you really believe it's not going to happen, it
It
won't.
won't.
I mean, it's really
Exactly.
black and white here, right? And so and being able to manifest something, I think, is something that most people really don't either understand or believe in. But I
Yes.
know with my clients, and it seems like with yours as well, Ricklyn, you really work with them on understanding that it is possible. You can change
Hmm.
on your terms.
Yes.
And the past doesn't define you at all. It just makes you who you
Hmm.
are, but you get to change that. You get to rewrite your story that works for you and what you want.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. That's
Mhm.
what that means for me.
Yes, for sure. And I love, we just, if you don't want to move, you don't have to move. There's
Hmm.
options. There are options out there. And,
Hmm.
especially I know with autoimmunity, sometimes we feel like there are no options because we're so
Hmm.
exhausted all the time and the brain fog is like so bad. And even though we have these strengths and we've leveraged the weaknesses, there's only so much we can do in the day. But
Hmm.
when we have the plan in place, like what you mentioned, the same, very similar, right? The wellness and the careers go together. When you have the
Hmm.
plan for your life, then anything's possible, right?
Yes, for sure.
Anything's possible. And you can manifest whatever you want, however you want it.
Hmm.
And yeah, working with a professional is a great way to be able to do that because it's really hard to do it
Hmm.
on your own. Um,
Yes. And that's definitely the role that I play with my clients. I mean, I'm
mhm,
probably very similar to you. I'm
mhm,
cheerleader someday. One day I'm strategic advisor. The next
mhm.
day,
Yep.
I'm playing devil's advocate with
Uh-huh.
them. So, but having that support system in their corner to really remind them who they are and what they're
Absolutely.
capable of is a huge
Mhm.
part of what I do as a coach.
Absolutely, and similar for me as well as the accountability. When you
Mhm.
have someone that's holding you accountable, you're more apt to get what you want and continue and follow through
Mhm.
with it versus settling for a life of just existing. And
Yes.
so that's just so prominent, and I think with most coaches, right? But it really depends on who the coach is, of course, just to be able
Mhm.
to have that relationship with the accountability, holding that person accountable for what they want and what they want
Yes.
to manifest in their life.
Mhm.
And talk a little bit about navigating the career journey. A lot of times we start with jobs. Some people stay at jobs for their whole career. Some people bounce around. what are your thoughts on that? And how is the career journey shaping up currently in the world?
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. Everybody's journey is going to be different.
Mhm.
Although we do live in a time right now where things have changed. Like you mentioned, there are people who stay at jobs for years, but we're seeing less and less of that, especially
Mhm.
as the economy is changing. We're seeing all these layoffs in mass
Mhm.
numbers. But it is important to like be kind of the architect of that journey. You get to
Mm,
decide.
I love that.
It falls in line with owning your career. However, I would say the journey is more about being strategic about what your
Mhm.
plan is, thinking the next move and the next move, the next move thereafter. So I
Right.
often work with people on, short-term goals and long-term career goals, and then we map
Mhm.
that out. What does that look like, and what is it going to take for you to get there? So that's not just
Mhm.
the places you'll work, but it's maybe the certifications you need to pursue.
Mm.
It's the continuing education that you'll need to do. What are
Mhm.
some of the skill gaps that you are going to need to close to get to where
Mhm.
you want to be ultimately?
Mhm.
And then making sure that in your current role, you're seeking out those opportunities to develop
Mhm.
those
Sure.
skills that you might be lacking. So it's really
Mhm.
about taking a holistic approach, looking
Mm.
at where you are, where you want to go, and then
Mm.
filling in those gaps in between and understanding that you might not be able to get what you need at this
Mhm.
particular job. And if you really want to get to this place, it may
Yes.
mean making 2 or 3 moves to get there, depending
Mm.
on what the goal is.
Yes, I totally agree with that as well. And I love what you said about the holistic approach, and that you might not be able to get to where you want in one jump or from one career to the
Mhm,
next. You might have to do multiple in between or certifications. And so that is very similar with autoimmunity. The holistic approach
mhm.
is what I agree with, is how I coach. Because when you have a holistic view, you're able to take care of your whole body, not just the disease that we're treating. And this, I think, from what you said, this is very similar with your job, that it's not just
Mhm.
this one job that you're taking care of, right?
Yeah.
Or it's the whole journey from start to finish and mapping out that plan.
Mhm.
So having that holistic approach and view on life will allow you to be where you want in your job and in your health and wellness, which is, the best
Yes.
possible scenario for
Mhm,
sure.
and rerouting as you need to, right? Like,
Yes,
sometimes you might have
absolutely.
the best laid
Yes,
plan, and then you're like, "Well, that didn't quite work out, so let me
right.
make a U-turn and reroute."
Absolutely. Absolutely, because the path is never straight. It's always, which way are
Mhm.
you gonna go? And if it's not working, just go the other direction. It's okay. It's
Yes.
okay. It's gonna be okay.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So Ricklyn, thank you so much. This has been absolutely incredible,
Yeah.
insightful. If you could share with us, how if people want to get more information about you and your coaching services, how can they contact you?
Absolutely. So LinkedIn is my platform of choice. So I can definitely be found on LinkedIn. My profile is just Ricklyn Woods, or you can visit my website at ricklynwoods.com.
Amazing. So I'll go ahead and drop those links down below in the comments and the show notes. And I am just so thrilled that we were able to have this conversation about wellness and career, all tied together for a healthy, active lifestyle. So thank you so much,
Yes.
Ricklyn. I really appreciate you.
Thank you again for having me. It's been an enjoyable conversation.
Absolutely. You're welcome.